I apologize for my long absence, but in June I had a serious motorbike accident, not my fault, and I wasn't able to edit this video or work professionally, play gigs on the bass. Fortunately, I was able to record all the footage before the accident. I present you the history of the German brand Victoria and its, in my opinion, most beautiful motorbike, the 1954 Victoria Bergmeister V35 S, which I managed to restore in my garage. In 1885, two German keen cyclists, Max Ottenstein and Max Frankenburger, decided to start producing and selling bicycles. Ladies and gentlemen, this is one of the hottest bikes on the planet. Victoria Bergmeister V35 1954. Excellent bike. Let's ride it. The first bicycles began to be made in 1886 in rented garage with 20 workers. Demand for bicycles was great. A so-called velodrome was built where the first customers could learn to ride a bicycle. There was coffee and music for wealthy citizens while their children practiced riding. In 1890 they were among the first to build the so-called free wheel, a mechanism that allowed you to keep your feet stationary on the pedals while the wheels rotated and the bicycles moved forward. From 1981, the wheels were fitted with a pneumatic tire, just 3 years after John Dunlop, an Irish vet, invented it. At the Chicago exhibition in 1983, the company received a gold medal for the high-end bicycles. Bolts come loose, it is necessary to use Loctite. This one, for example, has come loose a lot. These are important parts. Sales of bicycles grew, and from 1995 the name was changed to Victoria. Because in Germany at the time there was an overproduction of bicycles, the prices fell, and at the end of the 19th century, when the profit started to shrink, it was decided to change the name to Victoria Werke AG, which happened in 1899, and to focus on all technical innovations, especially motorbikes. The prototype of the first Victoria motorbike was presented already in 1901, which makes the brand one of the oldest in the world. Of course, conceptually, motorbikes were more like bicycles with an attached engine. At that time there were already dozens of motorbike brands in Europe, all offering their engines for sale. The first Victoria motorbikes left the factory in 1904 and had engines from FN, Minerva, Cedel, Kudel or Fafnir. You can put the camera here, I will turn here or something. Alright, we will do it. A young man, Marcin was already working at Kudel, and in 15 years his fate was to merge with Victoria. In 1908, alone 26,000 motorbikes were built. In 1912, another building had to be constructed to keep up with production. In short, business was excellent. During the First World War, civilian production of Victoria was completely suspended, and motorbikes with solid rubber wheels were sent to the front. After the war, production resumed, and Victoria's emblem is a stylized royal eagle, which can be found in the coat of arms and seal of the city of Nuremberg. In 1920, the KR series was introduced. The first model of the series was the KR1. It was a completely new design with the grey and blue paintwork, a characteristic feature of Victoria motorbikes. The engine was purchased from Bayern Motorenwerken, which at the time did not yet produce its own motorbikes. Its designer was the already mentioned Martin Stolle. These engines were used by many German brands, for example Karoo, RS, Bison, Heller, Corona. It was a two-cylinder flat twin with 494 cc, a side valve, 68mm bore and piston stroke. At 2800 rpm it developed 6.5 horsepower. An innovation in the engine was the use of the alloy pistons. The material for the pistons and the positioning of the cylinders along the frame of the motorbike were not accidental. Stolle had already had 6 years experience with the English Douglas 350cc flat twin engine, and there he used pistons made from an alloy of aluminium and copper. The new material worked well. The KR with its 2-speed gearbox and the popular belt drive of the time sold extremely well and established Victoria's reputation. Sporting successes. Martin Stolle preferred to ride in competitions on Victoria motorbikes with engines from BMW. The first major competition took place in 1921 at the Reichsfahrt, where Stolle, despite winning the test, finished 6th because the motorbike burned too much during the combustion test. A year later, his clubmate Joseph Meyer on the KR won the class classification ahead of NSU and Wanderer at the same event. BMW from 1922 moved engine production to Zedelbauer in Munich, a small machine factory where the new OHV engine was developed in just 6 months. Thanks to the agreement between Victoria and Zedelbauer, the new KR2 model was equipped with a new OHV engine. The displacement was increased to 499 cc and the power to 9 horsepower, an impressive result for the time. At the race in Berlin in 1922, the first test of the new engine took place, where Stolle himself insisted on driving the Victoria. It was not without small engine failures, which were however quickly rectified. The motorbike won first place in the Bavarian reliability race, in Gebelbach mountain tests, the Pfalzpreisrennen, and crowned a string of success with the victory in the Reichsfahrt in 1922. In 1923, the Victoria took part in the 690 km reliability run in Spain and left the rest for behind. To take over the engine production, Victoria took over the Zedelbauer company. In September 1923, all engine production was transferred to the main plant in Nuremberg. Thus, Martin Stolle was taken over by Victoria and all motorbike production was built in one plant. In 1924, the KR3 appeared with power increased to 12 horsepower. Exactly 3 years after the KR1, BMW released the R32 and stopped selling their engines, so Victoria's decision to build the engines themselves was the right one. Stolle left Victoria in early 1924 and was replaced by Gustav Steinlein. He was involved in increasing the performance of the motorbike engines by using a compressor. Experiments were carried out with a Roots compressor installed above the rear cylinder. In 1925, a competition was held in Freiburg, where the Victoria with Alt at the helm immediately outpaced the BMW competition with an average speed of 146 km/h. A month later, 3 compressors were presented at the AVUS, piloted by Alt, Steinhauer and Brutz, whose machine was the only one to survive the 314 km distance and came fourth. To improve engine cooling, a compressor was fitted over the front cylinder for 1926. In the Freiburg kilometer record in 1926, Brutes achieved a record speed of 164 km per hour. The experiments with the compressors were ended in 1926. No motorbike survives to this day. In 1927, the KR4 with a capacity of 600 cc and 15 horsepower was added to the model range, to be replaced in the same year by the KR6 with 18 horsepower. According to the brochure, a 24 horsepower sport version of the KR7 was also available with 2 carburetors and separate exhaust pipes. New models and Bergmeister. The Victoria was an expensive motorbike. For example, the KR6 cost 1750 Reichsmark, which suggested that it was a motorbike for the gentleman who could afford a car but preferred to ride a fine motorbike. However, this was not good for the company's income, because in Germany at the time, the majority of the population lived in very poor conditions and also wanted to own a motorbike. It was therefore decided to introduce some cheaper models, for example the simplified KR6 model with a simpler fork and no removable rear wing tip. For the 350cc class, the KR35 was introduced. For the 200cc class, the KR20 was introduced, for which Archer Gears engines were imported from England by Sturmy, who were well known for producing good gearboxes. In 1930, the KR50 was offered with a 500cc side valve engine, followed a year later by the KR50 S with a OHV engine. In 1931, the elongated flat twin was completely redesigned. The valves were sealed, the flywheel was hidden inside the crankcase. The motorbike had a chrome tank. In short, it was a completely new machine. The last and the greatest international victory of the KR6 was in the 1931-32 season, when it won the European Rally Championship in the sidecar class 2 times in a row. The KR6 was given the mark Bergmeister Mountain Champion after this feat. Since then, as a result of the recession, smaller capacity models have sold well, and exclusive large capacity models have not sold well. The V75 model, more like a bicycle than a motorbike with a 74cc Zax engine, appeared on the market. In 1932 there were also models KR12 125cc and KR20 with ILO engine 200cc. When the Nazis came to power in 1933, new import and currency laws were passed, which meant the end of the imported English Sturmy Archer engines, which had been imported since 1927. Max Ottenstein had to emigrate from the country. Victoria reacted quickly and re-employed Martin Stolle, who had left the factory 10 years earlier. In 1934, Stolle designed an elegant twin-cylinder that was completely covered in sheet metal and powered the new KR8. A year later, a new KR9 model was introduced, which used side intake valves and tappet-operated top exhaust valves to improve cooling. It didn't help, the series' reputation was damaged and sales were limited. Even the introduction of a service changing to engine from KR9 at a price of 270 Reichsmark did not help. Eventually, sales ceased in 1938. After the Second World War, the Victoria factory was completely destroyed by Allied bombing. Initially, they started to produce small motorbikes from surviving parts. The Aero model with 250cc two-stroke engine proved to be a hit, but Victoria's management dreamed of introducing a large four-stroke motorbike capable of riding with a sidecar at speed of over 60 km per hour. In order not to lose market shares in the fast-growing post-war market, it was decided to run a model that would carry the Bergmeister name back to the brand's glory years. The economic miracle of the 1950s was underway, and there was a good chance that more affluent customers would buy a more expensive, more advanced motorbike. The V35 engine was designed by a capable engineer who had his design office with his brother in Ingolstadt, Richard Kubiszyn. The concept of such a V2 engine had been used by Kubiszyn in a prototype engine for the RD 750 motorbike already in 1938, which however did not enter series production due to the war. The new Victoria motorbike was to have a displacement of 350 cc. The V2 engine was featured with smooth lines in Art Deco style. In order not to spoil the smooth line of the cylinders, the spark plugs were located on their inside and the intake ducts were placed inside the cylinders. This solution in practice meant a reduction in power as a result of the long and narrow intake ducts. The single beam carburetor was placed under an elegant cover. The valve train was complicated. A camshaft was located high up in the block, driven by a chain with a tensioner. The camshaft in turn drove the valves using pushrods. The gearbox was also Kubiszyn's trademark. Power transmission was by double chains, which was supposed to ensure quiet operation during the ride, and the transmission itself to the rear wheel was by cardan shaft. The motorbike ideally bridged the gap between the Horek singles and the big boxers of BMW or Zindab, but was introduced too late. It was decided to call the V35 a Bergmeister, in reference to the successful KR6 Bergmeister model, which brought Victoria real popularity before the war. The motorbike cost 2,750 Deutsche Mark, more than the singles but much cheaper than the big boxers. The first V35 shown at the exhibition in 1951 had an engine made of wood, and some of the components came from the KR25, but it was not until 1953 that serial sales began, which ended in 1956, and during this time some 5,000 V35s were produced. It is estimated that today there are some 500 of this unique motorbike in the world. I adjusted it yesterday because the engine was running very badly. I found the valve settings 0.10 mm on the intake valve, 0.15 mm on the exhaust valve, 0.4 mm gap on the spark plugs, and 0.3 mm on the interrupter. I set this up and the bike rides like it has 1500 horsepower, not 21. Victoria Bergmeister V35 S 1954. Such a cool bike. See you next time!